If you close your eyes for a moment and picture the Roman Empire, you probably imagine shining marble buildings, busy markets, and fancy senators arguing about laws nobody actually reads. But the truth is, most of Rome wasn't marble or sunshine. Most of it was edges, borders, long stretches of land where the empire faded into forests, rivers, deserts, mountains, and mystery. This is the frontier, where Rome ended and the unknown began. Now, when you hear frontier, you might imagine heroic music, big battles, and soldiers shouting dramatic speeches. But hold on, life on Rome's frontier was not like a movie. It was slower, colder, quieter, and honestly, a little lonely. But that's also what makes it interesting. Because every night, while cities slept under warm lights, thousands of Roman soldiers stood awake at these edges, guarding the empire with nothing but their shield, their training, and whatever courage they could find on a chilly morning. To a Roman citizen living in a city, the frontier was a faraway rumor. Someone in Rome might imagine it as a place full of strange tribes, wild weather, and endless danger. A place you told stories about, not a place you actually wanted to live. If someone said they were being sent to the frontier, most people answered with a, "Whoa, good luck." The same way you might respond when a friend tells you they failed math class for the third time. But to a Roman soldier, the frontier wasn't a rumor at all. It was home. Not a fun home, not a warm home, but the kind of home where you know every stone in the road, every creak of the wooden gate, and every annoying sound your bunkmate makes when he sleeps. A typical frontier wasn't glamorous. In the north, places like Britain and Germania, the landscape was mostly thick forests and endless fields, the kind of place where trees look like they're whispering secrets, and the wind always sounds a bit suspicious. Winters were long, gray, and freezing, the kind of cold that sneaks into your boots even when you swear you tied them tight. Roman soldiers stationed there often wrote letters complaining about the weather, which honestly makes them feel very relatable. In the east, like Syria or Judea, the frontier felt completely different. Hot, dry, dusty. The air shimmered in the heat, and the sky seemed to stretch forever. Soldiers there dealt with sunburn, sand in their sandals, and the constant feeling that the sun was personally insulting them. But even with all this, the frontier held a strange beauty, a wide, open world where every sunrise felt like a brand new page. And then there were the mountain frontiers, rough paths, cold nights, thin air, and the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. You could stand on a ridge and feel like you were staring into another world. But no matter which frontier you stood on, one thing stayed the same. You were far from Rome, far from home, far from everything familiar. Now, why were these frontiers so important? Simple. Rome was huge, and huge things need strong edges. Without guards, outposts, forts, and watchtowers, the empire would fall apart. So soldiers were sent to these ends of the world to keep watch, keep order, and sometimes just keep themselves awake during long, quiet nights. People today imagine Roman soldiers constantly fighting like every day was a dramatic battle. But honestly, most of their time was spent waiting for orders, waiting for patrols, waiting for supplies that were always late, waiting for something exciting to happen, which it usually didn't. You can imagine a soldier leaning against a fort wall, staring into the dark forest beyond, thinking, well, nothing's trying to invade us today either. Great. It wasn't glamorous, but it was necessary. Rome didn't stay strong because of giant battles. It stayed strong because of steady, patient soldiers doing simple duties every single day. When night fell, the frontier changed its personality. The world grew quiet. Fires crackled inside the fort. Somewhere, a soldier snored loudly enough to shake the walls. Another soldier stared at the stars, counting them because there was literally nothing else to do. The wind blew across the open land, carrying the smell of pine forests, cold rivers, or desert sand. Nights like these made you think about home, about family, about why you ever signed up for this job in the first place. Some soldiers found peace in these nights. Others found boredom. But all of them felt the same constant presence. The edge, because at the frontier, you didn't just live next to the unknown. You lived with it. You slept beside it. You woke up to it every morning. And that feeling, that mix of calm, danger, purpose, and loneliness shaped the heart of every Roman soldier who ever stood guard there. The frontier also had a strange charm. For some soldiers, it was the first place they ever saw snow. For others, it was where they learned new languages, tried new food, or made friends with locals they once feared. Life on the edges could push you, test you, change you, sometimes quietly, sometimes suddenly. Imagine standing at a wooden watchtower, looking out at miles of dark forest. The wind is cold, but the stars are bright. Behind you, the fort glows softly with lamplight. In front of you, the unknown waits. Not to attack, not to scare you, just to exist. And in that moment, you understand what the frontier truly is. A border not just between Rome and the outside world, but a border between certainty and mystery. And that's where our story begins. Not in the busy heart of the empire, but out here where the air is sharp, the nights are long, and a soldier learns to live between two worlds. In this chapter, you've met the setting. In the next one, you'll meet the person who has to live in it, the recruit who leaves everything behind to start a new life as a Roman soldier. Let's step forward together, deeper into the world of the frontier. Before a Roman soldier ever touched the frontier, he first had to make the biggest decision of his life, joining the army. For many young men across the empire, this choice wasn't made with trumpets and heroic speeches. It was usually made after a long talk with family, a hard look at reality, or sometimes just one bad day at work. Life in ancient Rome wasn't always easy. If you were poor, the army looked like a pretty solid deal. Regular pay, food, a place to sleep, a decent pair of sandals that didn't fall apart every 3 days. And after years of service, you could even earn Roman citizenship, a huge reward, the ancient version of getting the best ID card in the world. For others, the decision came from stories they heard. Recruitment officers traveled around towns telling tales, glory, adventure, and seeing the world, which sounded very cool if you were a teenager who had never left your village. Of course, those officers left out the boring details like long marches, cleaning your own gear every day, and the fact that you might be stationed somewhere colder than your ex's heart. But still, the army offered opportunity. So one morning, a young man would pack his things, say goodbye to his family, and head to the nearest recruitment point. Sometimes his mother cried. Sometimes his father tried to act proud. And sometimes his friends followed him a few steps, pretending they weren't jealous, even though they totally were. When he arrived, the process began. It wasn't complicated, but it wasn't easy either. A recruiter, usually a tough-looking officer with a stare as sharp as a spear, examined him from head to toe. The army wanted men who were healthy, strong enough to carry heavy gear, and able to march long distances without collapsing dramatically. You didn't need to look like a bodybuilder, just healthy, balanced, and able to take orders without rolling your eyes. Recruits had to raise their right hand and swear the sacramentum, the oath of loyalty to Rome, the emperor, and their commanders. It wasn't a fancy ceremony, but it was powerful. Once you swore that oath, you were no longer just a civilian. You were part of something bigger. You promised to follow commands, protect the empire, and not run away, even if things got a little stressful. For many new soldiers, that oath felt heavy, but also exciting. It was the first step into a new identity. From that moment on, their life changed completely. After the oath came the first shock, leaving home. No more familiar streets, no more moms cooking, no more lazy afternoons lying in the sun. Instead, the recruit joined a group of strangers who would soon become the closest thing to family he might ever have. Together, they marched to their first training ground, usually located far from the comforts of town life. Imagine a young recruit at this moment. He's walking along a dusty road. His pack feels heavier with every step. His sandals are already starting to annoy him. The sun is too hot or the wind is too cold because the weather is never perfect when you need it to be. Behind him is his old life. In front of him is a future he can't quite picture yet, and then he reaches the training camp. The first thing he notices is the structure. Rows of tents or barracks perfectly lined up, soldiers moving in order, officers barking commands, and the sound of training weapons hitting wooden posts. It's a world where everything has a place and a purpose. Even the dust seems to fall in straight lines. The new recruit quickly learns that the army loves rules. Rules for when to wake up. Rules for how to march. Rules for how clean your gear should be. Rules for how to hold your shield, how to stand in formation, and probably rules for how loudly you're allowed to breathe. It could feel overwhelming at first, but there was a reason behind it. Rome believed that discipline was the foundation of strength. Still, soldiers weren't machines. They were young men adjusting to a new life. Some handled it with confidence, others with quiet worry. Some joked around to hide how confused they felt. Some missed home terribly. But all of them shared the same goal: to become legionaries. Many recruits came from small villages and had never seen large cities, foreign travelers, or massive military camps. Some had never traveled more than a day away from home. Suddenly, they were surrounded by people from different regions, accents, and cultures. Gauls with wild hairstyles, Africans with bright clothing, Greeks who spoke faster than anyone else, Syrians with colorful belts and clever jokes. It was like joining a giant, slightly chaotic, ancient version of a school dorm, except everyone had swords. The army gave them new clothes, a simple tunic, a belt, and sandals. Later, they would receive armor and weapons, but not before earning them through effort. The first few days were full of introductions, awkward conversations, and quiet moments of adjusting to this new life. The nights were often the hardest. Sleeping in a crowded barracks with strangers wasn't exactly relaxing, and the wooden beds didn't help. But slowly, this group of strangers started becoming friends. Over time, the recruit started feeling something shifting inside him. Confidence grew. Shyness faded. The idea of being part of Rome's mighty legions started to feel real. He wasn't a full soldier yet, far from it. But he was on the path. The biggest change came not from the rules or the training posts, but from the people around him. He saw older soldiers, veterans, who walked with calm confidence. They had scars, stories, and a way of carrying themselves that said, "I've seen things, kid, and I survived." Veterans became the silent teachers of new recruits, showing them how to tie their equipment properly, how to avoid getting in trouble, and where to get the best food in camp. The recruit watched these men and thought, one day, that'll be me. Or more honestly, I hope I don't mess this up. In these early days, something very important happened. He learned to belong. Becoming a Roman soldier wasn't about lifting the heaviest shield or marching the fastest. It was about stepping into a community, a team, a brotherhood. The recruit didn't know it yet, but the men standing beside him would one day become the people he trusted most through fear, boredom, laughter, and endless guard duty. And so after recruitment, after saying goodbye to home, after swearing the oath, the young man took his first steps into this new life. Tomorrow, training would begin. Tomorrow, he would sweat march and question all his life choices. Tomorrow, he would start the long journey toward becoming a soldier ready to face the frontier. But for now, he simply lay down in his bunk, stared at the ceiling, and thought, well, here we go. Morning came earlier in the training camp than anywhere else on the planet. At least, that's how every recruit felt. The sun barely rose, and already an officer was shouting orders loud enough to wake the ancestors. Our fresh recruit, still half asleep and wondering why he signed up for this, stumbled out of his bunk, pulled on his tunic, and joined the line of new soldiers who all looked exactly the same, tired, confused, and already questioning their life choices. This was the beginning of training, the long, tough journey from ordinary civilian to disciplined Roman legionary. Training wasn't meant to be easy. Rome didn't want half-hearted soldiers who needed naps every 2 hours. They wanted men who could march great distances, hold formation, and survive the long, boring days on the frontier. So the very first thing they learned was not how to fight, but how to march. And march they did. They marched in the morning. They marched in the afternoon. And sometimes they marched for so long that recruits joked they would march in their dreams too. The idea was simple: a legion moved like a machine. If one soldier got tired or fell out of line, the entire formation suffered. So recruits learned to walk in perfect rhythm, step by step, shield by shield, until the sound of sandals hitting the ground almost became a strange kind of music. Then came running. Lots of running. Officers loved running. They probably dreamed about running. Recruits didn't love it quite as much, but they learned quickly that complaining only made the officers run faster. So they kept quiet. Once the recruits had warmed up, meaning their legs felt like warm noodles, it was time for drills. These drills taught discipline. Commands had to be followed instantly. Move left. Raise shield. Step back. Close formation. Open formation. Sometimes the orders changed so fast that recruits nearly spun in circles, but that was the point. That was the point. A good legionary reacted without thinking, like it was second nature, but training wasn't all serious. Between drills, there were small moments of humor. Someone dropped their shield with a loud clang. Someone tripped over a stone and pretended they meant to do it. Someone made a joke under their breath, and everyone tried not to laugh, because if the officer heard it, they'd be doing extra laps. Even with these jokes, training was no joke. Every day pushed the recruits a little harder. But as the days passed, something interesting happened. They started getting stronger. Their legs didn't shake as much after marches. Their breathing steadied during runs. Their shields felt a little lighter in their hands. Confidence began to grow, slowly but surely. Then came weapon practice, a moment many recruits secretly waited for. But the army had a surprise. They didn't start with real weapons. Instead, they trained with wooden swords that were heavier than the real ones. If a recruit thought wooden swords sounded easy, he quickly learned otherwise. Swinging one around for an hour felt like wrestling a small tree. Practice dummies stood lined up in rows, looking like wooden enemies waiting to be bullied. Recruits practiced their strikes, steps, and shield movements over and over again. Officers reminded them constantly that Roman fighting style wasn't about wild swings or dramatic spins. No, Rome preferred simple, controlled, efficient movements. They believed in teamwork, not flashy hero moments. Save the dramatic moves for theater. An officer might say, walking past with a smirk, learning to use the shield properly was just as important. The Roman shield wasn't just for blocking, it was a partner. Recruits learned how to hold it, turn with it, and use it to create a protective wall with the soldiers beside them. Standing shoulder to shoulder, shields overlapping, they formed a barrier strong enough that recruits often joked they could survive a rainstorm without getting wet. As training continued, recruits learned to fight as a group. They moved together, advanced together, and retreated together. A legion was only powerful because each man trusted the one next to him. That trust didn't come from speeches. It came from sweating, marching, and struggling side by side until everyone understood they were stronger together. But not all training involved weapons or marching. Some days, recruits were given tools instead of swords, picks, shovels, axes. The army believed that a good soldier also needed to know how to build roads, build camps, build fort walls. These construction days were exhausting, but the work taught recruits patience, teamwork, and problem solving. And honestly, after endless marching drills, many recruits found building a nice change of pace. Still, training wasn't just about the body, it was about the mind too. Recruits learned basic survival skills, how to set up camp properly, how to follow orders calmly, and how to stay alert without stressing themselves into an early retirement. They learned the signals of horns and flags, which could mean anything from move forward to stop immediately to whoever dropped that spear needs to pick it up right now. And then there were the veterans, the older soldiers who had actually seen the frontier. They didn't shout or brag. They simply watched the recruits with a knowing look, like they were seeing versions of their younger selves. When a recruit struggled with tying his armor or holding his shield correctly, a veteran stepped over quietly and showed him how to fix it. When someone panicked at a loud noise, the veteran laughed softly and said, "Relax. That was just Marcus dropping something again." Recruits looked up to these veterans. They were living proof that survival was possible, that the frontier wasn't some terrifying monster waiting to eat everyone alive. Seeing veterans laugh, joke, and share stories made recruits believe they too could grow into that calm confidence. As weeks turned into months, something amazing happened. The group of confused young men who first arrived at camp slowly disappeared. In their place stood soldiers. Not perfect soldiers, not fearless soldiers, but soldiers who could march for hours, hold formation, follow commands, and trust their new brothers in arms. By the end of training, the recruit who had once struggled to hold his wooden sword could now move confidently, shield raised, steps steady. The camp that once felt strange and overwhelming now felt familiar. The people who were strangers now felt like teammates, even friends. He still missed home. He still wondered what the frontier would actually be like. He still had quiet moments where he doubted himself. But deep inside, he knew he had changed. He knew he could handle whatever came next. And what came next was big. The frontier, the edge of the empire, the place where his training would finally meet the real world. But that's a story for the next chapter. If you've made it this far, welcome deeper into the frontier. You've survived the long road, the shouting officers, the heavy packs, and the disappointing camp food. Now you've arrived at the place where you'll spend most of your military career, the Roman outpost. And let me tell you, it's probably not what you imagine when you think glorious Roman Empire. No marble statues, no grand temples, definitely no cheering crowds. Instead, picture a cluster of wooden walls, a gate that squeaks when the wind hits it, and a watchtower that looks like it's held together by hope more than nails. But hey, this is home now. Let's look around. The first look a fort. That's Mort. Functional. Then beautiful Roman frontier forts weren't built to impress. They were built to keep you alive. Think of them as ancient military base camps designed by practical engineers who probably said something like, "Does it stand good enough?" Next problem. As you walk through the main gates, the whole place smells like wood smoke, worn leather, and whatever the cook is burning for dinner. The ground is packed dirt that turns to mud on rainy days and dust clouds on dry ones. The walls rise around the fort like giant wooden ribs, tall enough to give you security, but short enough to remind you that a determined enemy could still cause trouble inside the walls. Everything is arranged in neat Roman fashion, straight lines, simple layouts, no nonsense buildings. Rome liked order, even in the wilderness. Your new neighbors. The barracks, your living quarters are long, narrow buildings called contubernia, kind of like ancient dorms, but with less privacy and more snoring. Each room fits 8 soldiers. Yes, 8. No, there's no personal space. If you thought you were going to have a cozy corner with your own little desk, maybe a plant, maybe some wall decor, forget it. You get a bed made of wood planks, a shared storage chest, and about half an arm's length of space. But the good news, you're all in this together. Your roommates become or become your closest friends, or at least the people who understand your problems the best. The jokes you share, the complaints you whisper under your breath, the long nights of guard duty, those things build a bond that books can't describe. And if you're lucky, one of your roommates will be the guy who knows how to trade for extra bread. Every barracks has one. The parade ground, where training never stopped. Just outside the barracks sits a wide open square. This is the parade ground, also known as the place where dreams of sleeping in are crushed. You'll spend a lot of time here practicing drills, marching in formation, and trying not to drop your shield during inspection. Even on the frontier, Roman discipline stayed tight. The officers believed that lazy soldiers made easy targets, and honestly, they weren't wrong. Still, training here hits differently. There's no city noise, no crowds watching. Just you, your unit, and the wide sky stretching over endless wilderness. Sometimes, when the wind is calm and the forest is quiet, it feels like you're the only people left in the world. It's strange, but kind of peaceful. The watchtower, where boredom reigns. Every fort has a few watchtowers. They're tall, wooden, and often swaying slightly in the wind, just enough to make you question their safety. Your shift up there will teach you 2 things. 1, you can get bored even while looking at beautiful scenery. And 2, every tiny noise will convince you an attack is coming. Most of the time, you'll just stare at trees, snow, fields, or rivers, depending on where you're stationed. Maybe you'll see a deer. Maybe you'll see a trading caravan. Maybe absolutely nothing will happen for hours. But that's the frontier, quiet until it isn't. Some soldiers swear they once saw something in the distance, a shadow, a figure, a glint of metal. Others say the wilderness plays tricks on your eyes, especially when you're tired. Either way, watching from the tower reminds you that Rome may be massive. But out here, it feels very small. The commanding officer's quarters, one part of the fort does look impressive, the commander's house. His residence, called the Praetorium, has nicer walls, proper furniture, and sometimes even heating. Heating? Imagine that. Compared to your barracks, it feels like luxury. Beds with cushions, actual doors, maybe even rugs. But hey, being in charge of hundreds of soldiers in the middle of nowhere is stressful. Let the man have his comfy seat. He's the one who decides patrol schedules, training, punishment, and how long you'll have to stand in formation tomorrow morning. It's wise to stay on his good side. The storage buildings, where food is gold. On one side of the fort, you'll see long warehouses storing grain, dried meat, olive oil, tools, spare weapons, everything a small, isolated community needs. You won't visit these places often unless you're assigned duty there. But you'll think about them constantly, especially when dinner is running low or when rumors spread that more supplies are arriving from the south. Some soldiers say the frontier feels safest on supply days. When the wagons arrive, the whole fort buzzes with life, new boots, better food, fresh arrows, letters from home. But when supplies are delayed, you learn to appreciate even the blandest barley porridge. The small temple faith at the frontier. Every fort has a small shrine or temple, maybe dedicated to Jupiter, Mars, or local gods the soldiers adopted. It's simple, but important. When you live far from home, faith becomes a comfort. Soldiers often leave small offerings, hoping for protection. A coin, a carved wooden figure, a small handful of grain. On quiet evenings, the temple glows softly in lantern light. Some soldiers kneel there. Some just stand silently. Some don't visit at all, but everyone knows it's there, the one peaceful place in an unpredictable world. Life inside the walls, by the end of your first week, you've accepted that the fort is not glamorous, but it works. It keeps the cold winds out. It gives structure to your days. It forms a little island of order in a sea of wilderness. Here you learn routines, you learn faces, you learn which wooden plank in the barracks creaks the loudest when someone tries to sneak in late. Most importantly, you learn that life on the frontier isn't about glory. It's about endurance, skill, teamwork, and patience. So much patience. This outpost, rough as it is, becomes your entire world. And outside those walls, well, that's where things get interesting. But we'll talk about that next. Life on the frontier might look wild and dangerous from the outside, but most days are surprisingly normal. Not easy, not comfortable, but normal. The danger exists hanging around the edges of everything like a shadow you can't shake, but it doesn't happen every hour. Instead, your days follow a rhythm, a routine, a pattern shaped by discipline, duty, and the strange calm that comes from living at the edge of the unknown world. So grab your sandals, shake out your cloak, and let's walk through what a typical day looks like for a Roman soldier posted far away from home before dawn. The trumpet calls, your day begins before the sun even thinks about waking up. A trumpet blasts through the fort, loud enough to make you question every life choice that brought you here. And trust me, Roman trumpets were not gentle instruments. They were designed to wake soldiers, scare enemies, and probably annoy anyone trying to sleep past sunrise. Inside the barracks, the room shifts from snoring to grumbling as everyone rolls off their wooden beds. You stretch your back, rub your eyes, and instantly regret the chilly air biting at your face. Frontier mornings are no joke. There's no time for slow wake ups. You throw on your tunic, lace your sandals, and try to make your armor sit right. At least one guy in your room always puts something on backwards. Every single morning. Early inspection, the art of looking alert. Once the soldiers gather in the parade ground, the centurion walks by, scanning the lines with eyes sharp enough to see a crooked belt buckle from a mile away. You must stand straight, chin up, shield clean, gear ready. It's too early for anyone to be cheerful, but the Romans were big believers in discipline, so you try your best to look alive. The centurion shouts instructions. You nod like you understood all of them, even if your brain is still loading like an old computer. Some days, inspection is quick. Other days, he's in a mood and decides the entire unit needs a lecture about shield maintenance. It happens. Morning drills march, and more marching. After inspection comes the part of the day every soldier knows by heart day drills. You march, then you march faster. Then you march slower. Then the centurion makes you practice turning left and right until your legs feel like boiled noodles. But don't complain. Marching is basically the Roman superpower. It's how they moved armies across huge distances and kept the empire connected. If there were Olympic Games for walking, Rome would win gold every time. There are also weapon drills. You train with your gladius, your throwing javelin, and your shield. You practice formations, tight squares, defensive walls, advancing lines. Even on a peaceful frontier, the army wants you sharp, focused, and ready. Training reminds you that danger could arrive one day when you least expect it. This is how you prepare for that, just in case. Breakfast, fuel for the day. After a long morning, you finally get breakfast. Don't get too excited. It's not a feast. The main dish is usually porridge, grain boiled in water until it becomes something between soup and glue. You might get bread, maybe cheese, maybe dried fruit if supplies are good. It's simple food, but it fills the stomach, and that's what counts. Some soldiers sprinkle herbs in their porridge to make it taste better. Others just accept their fate and eat it quietly. There's always one guy who complains every morning, this porridge tastes worse than yesterday, but somehow he still finishes the whole bowl. Mid-morning duties, work. Once breakfast is over, the real work begins. Frontier soldiers do way more than fight. The fort must run like a small village, which means everyone has jobs. Depending on the day, you might be assigned to the building repairs, fixing walls, towers, or the gate, cleaning gear. Armor polishing never ends. Helping at the granary, storing and checking food supplies. Animal care, feeding horses or pack animals, wood cutting. You can never have too much firewood, cooking duty. Let's hope you're not the soldier who burns grain. This is the part of frontier life people don't talk about enough. Roman soldiers were builders, cleaners, carpenters, messengers, guards, cooks, and general fix everything workers, because in a remote outpost, if something breaks, you fix it. Midday patrols walk the perimeter. At some point during the day, a group of soldiers heads out to patrol the area around the fort. You might be part of that group. You walk along the wall or outside the gate, checking for signs of movement, animal tracks, strange footprints, smoke in the distance, anything unusual. Most patrols are quiet. You talk softly. Watch the horizon and listen to the wind moving through trees or across empty plains. Sometimes the silence feels peaceful. Other times, it feels like the whole wilderness is holding its breath. Even though nothing usually happens, patrols remind you why you're here: to keep Rome's border safe, to watch the edges of the empire, to make sure the world outside stays peaceful. Lunch, a simple break. Lunch is quick. Bread, maybe cold leftovers, dried meat, or more porridge if you're unlucky. Nobody sits down for long. There's always work to do, and the officers like to keep everyone busy. Long lunch break on the frontier means 15 minutes. Still, soldiers gather in groups, share small jokes, or talk about home. These moments keep morale alive. Afternoon tasks, more work, more training afternoons, often repeat the morning's energy. You might join another drill, continue repairs, or help prepare for the evening watch. Some days, the commander schedules formation practice or tactical exercises. Other days are quieter. You sharpen weapons, reorganize supplies, or help clean the fort. It's not glamorous, but everything has a purpose. A frontier fort survives because everyone keeps it running. Late afternoon, free time, eventually, usually when the sun starts dropping, you get a short period of free time. This is when soldiers finally relax a little. Some play simple board games. Romans loved games almost as much as marching. Some write letters home, hoping they will reach their families. Others nap, repair clothes, or sit by the fire talking about their dreams, fears, or funny mistakes made during training. You might hear stories from veterans, tales of past battles, old commanders, and places far from the frontier. Their voices crack a little as they talk, because even soldiers miss home. Evening meal. The best time of day, dinner, is the biggest meal. Warm stew, bread, maybe a bit of meat, maybe beans or vegetables. Everyone talks louder during dinner. The fort feels alive. It's not luxurious food, but it fills your belly after a long, tiring day. After dinner, you feel the heaviness settle in your bones. The good kind of heaviness. I'm exhausted, but okay. Kind. Night watch, the final duty. Not everyone sleeps at night. Some soldiers take turns guarding the fort until dawn. If it's your turn, bring a cloak. The frontier gets cold, and the night feels huge. You stare into darkness, listen to distant sounds, and hope your shift ends quickly. Staying awake can be hard, but this duty keeps everyone safe. Lights out rest before it begins again. Finally, you crawl into your wooden bed. The barracks creak softly. Someone snores. Someone whispers a joke. Someone prays quietly, and as your eyes close, you remember, this is the frontier. This is life as a Roman soldier. Not all glory. Not all danger. Just steady, tough, disciplined living day after day. Tomorrow will look almost exactly the same, but that's what makes frontier soldiers strong. Every Roman frontier fort had walls, thick wooden ones, tall ones, ones that creaked when the wind hit just right. But sooner or later, you have to step outside them. And that's when frontier life gets real. Inside the fort, you have order, rules, schedules, a centurion yelling every few hours. Outside the fort, you have the wilderness. This chapter is all about the daily patrols and scouting missions that Roman soldiers carried out in the uncharted, unpredictable world beyond their walls. Some patrols were calm walks. Others felt like stepping into the pages of a story your parents told you not to read at night. Let's take a walk past the gate and see what it's like. Leaving the gate, the heavy silence of the frontier, the first step outside the gate always feels strange. The guards pull the wooden beams aside, the gate groans open, and sunlight pours through like you're walking into another world. Inside the fort, there's always a sound, someone hammering something, someone tripping over something, someone arguing about whose turn it is to clean the helmets. But outside, it's quiet. Not peaceful quiet, heavy quiet, the kind that makes you aware of every step you take. Even the air feels different. Colder, sharper, like the sky itself is watching. The patrol lines up, checks gear, and moves out in formation. One soldier always mutters, "Here we go." Under his breath, there's always that one guy. Types of patrols. Not all walks are equal. Not every patrol is the same. The Roman army liked variety, even if the soldiers didn't. You might be sent on 1 short perimeter patrols, just walking around the area close to the fort, checking for tracks, smoke, or anything suspicious. 2, deep forest or desert patrols. These are the stressful ones. The long walks into thick woods, wide plains, or sandy dunes. You go slow, quiet, and alert. 3, river patrols. If your fort sits near a river, you follow the water's edge, watching for boats, footprints, or broken branches. 4, village visits. Sometimes you visit local settlements to trade information or calm tensions. Some villagers, like Roman soldiers, some tolerate you. 5, scouting missions, sent ahead in small groups to map terrain or look for signs of movement. These are risky, and the commander doesn't pick rookies for them. Each patrol has its own rhythm, its own dangers, and its own type of boredom. Walking through the wilderness, beauty and nerves. Let's imagine a typical patrol through forest terrain, one of the most common settings on the northern frontier. The trees tower over you, tall and silent, their tops swaying in the wind. The ground crunches softly under your boots. Light filters through the leaves in long golden lines. And even though it's beautiful, you don't relax. Nobody does. Every twig snap gets attention. Every bird sound feels like a signal. Every shadow looks suspicious. You might hear a distant howl and pretend it's just a dog, not a wolf. You might see a deer dart through the trees and feel your heart jump before you realize it's just an animal minding its business. Nature is beautiful, but it doesn't care about your nerves. Tracking signs, footprints, smoke, and broken branches. Patrols aren't just about walking. They're about paying attention. The soldiers look for clues. The footprints too large to be from animals. Ash from a recently used campfire. Broken branches along a path. Boat markings near a riverbank. A trail that wasn't there yesterday. One soldier usually kneels down to inspect something and says something like, interesting. Does he actually know what he's looking at? Well, sometimes. The experienced soldiers do. They can tell how old a footprint is, which direction a small group traveled, or whether a campfire was made by locals, travelers, or someone who shouldn't be there. Tracking becomes second nature on the frontier. It has to, the calm before more calm. Here's the funny thing about patrols. For all the tension, most are peaceful. Honestly, a lot of your time is spent just walking up hills, walking across valleys, walking through waist-high grass, walking past confused goats. Sometimes you feel like you're walking across the entire empire on foot. It's not glamorous, but it's necessary. Patrols remind the locals that Rome is present, watching and ready. And even when nothing happens, the wilderness has a way of making your heart beat faster than you'd like. Local encounters, friends, strangers, and awkward moments. Every now and then you meet people, maybe a group of hunters, maybe a shepherd with his flock, maybe villagers carrying goods to trade, maybe kids who stare at your armor like you're the coolest thing they've ever seen. Most interactions are friendly. Romans often gave small gifts, salt, simple tools, or bread to maintain good relationships. But not everyone smiles when they see a Roman patrol. Some give you cautious looks. Some step aside quietly. Some turn around without a word. You continue walking, pretending you didn't notice the tension hanging in the air. Unexpected weather. The enemy. You can't fight. Sometimes the biggest threat isn't people. It's the weather. Different borders had different problems. The northern frontiers, freezing rain, muddy ground, and forests darker than your sense of humor after 3 months of barley porridge. The eastern deserts, burning heat, sandstorms, and the constant taste of dust in your mouth. So, African and Arabian borders, blazing sun, dry winds, and endless miles of nothingness. Alpine frontiers, snow that tries to eat your boots. Battles come and go. But weather wins every time. The returns relief behind the walls after hours of walking, watching, listening, and trying not to think about how heavy your gear is. The fort finally comes back into view. The walls look comforting for once. The gate seems welcoming. Even the guard on duty looks like a long-lost friend. Returning after a patrol feels like stepping back into civilization. The fort might be simple, but it's safe, predictable, familiar. You report your findings, sometimes interesting, sometimes boring, and then head to the barracks to rest your legs, because tomorrow there might be another patrol. Why patrols matter? Patrols aren't just military routine. They're the heartbeat of frontier life. They keep soldiers sharp. They keep enemies guessing. They keep peace by showing presence. They keep the fort connected to the land around it. A frontier soldier spends more time patrolling than fighting. But that's what keeps the border secure and the empire standing. Patrols are slow, quiet, sometimes beautiful, sometimes nerve-wracking, but always important. Living on the frontier isn't just about marching, guarding, and eating the world's blandest porridge. It's also about the people who live outside the fort, the locals whose lands, customs, and everyday routines shape the world around you. Some of these people like you. Some tolerate you. Some pretend they don't see you. And some, well, they definitely see you, and they're not thrilled that a Roman fort now blocks their favorite walking shortcut. But one thing is certain: the frontier is not empty. It's full of human life, culture, and history. And your experience as a Roman soldier depends just as much on your neighbors as it does on your officers. Let's spend a day meeting the locals, stepping into their world, a whole different rhythm. When you walk outside the fort, not on patrol, but on peaceful business, talking, trading, observing, the world feels completely different. The fields stretch wide. Smoke curls lazily from the roofs of simple homes. Children run around with sticks, pretending they're heroes of stories you don't understand. Dogs bark at you because, well, dogs bark at everything. Life around you moves at a slower pace. People tend their crops, take care of animals, or prepare meals. They've lived here long before Rome arrived, and they'll likely be here long after you retire, hopefully with all your limbs. And as you stand there watching, you realize something important. For them, this isn't the edge of an empire. It's simply home. Cultures mixing, sometimes smooth, sometimes not. Rome had a habit of appearing in places and saying, "Hello, we're here now." And the locals had a habit of reacting in every possible way. Some embraced Roman ways. Some ignored them. Some resisted quietly. Some resisted loudly. But you won't be hearing their stories today. You'll notice cultural differences immediately. Their clothing is different. Their tools look unfamiliar. Their language sounds like a collection of words your tongue refuses to pronounce. Their food smells amazing or terrifying. There is no in between. But over time, the frontier becomes a place where cultures mix in small, practical ways. Locals adopt Roman tools. Soldiers adopt local slang. Everyone learns the universal language of hand gestures. The mixing is messy, but also surprisingly natural, tradey. The ancient version of, "Can I borrow that?" Even in the quietest regions, trade happens constantly. And soldiers, they love a good bargain. You might see Romans exchanging salt or cloth for fresh milk. Locals trading honey, herbs, pottery, or handmade tools. The kids trying to swap small carved toys for shiny Roman belt buckles. Soldiers buying food, because they're tired of eating the same exact stew for the 300th day in a row. Trade keeps the peace. It builds trust. It makes life feel normal, though there's always a soldier who tries to trade for something ridiculous, like a goat, and gets lectured by the centurion for it. Communication a skill, not a guarantee. Talking to locals feels like playing a communication game on hard mode. You use Latin, they use their native tongue. Both of you use gestures and dramatic arm movements until someone finally understands something. A typical conversation might look like you pointing at a basket of apples, trade. Local points at your boots, trade. You, no, not boots. Apples, local. Ah. Then they hand you peers. Is it confusing? Absolutely. Does it work? Surprisingly often. Sometimes the fort has a translator, someone who grew up nearby, or a soldier who learned the local language. Those people become popular very quickly. Friendly locals, kind faces in a harsh world. Throughout the frontier, you'll meet people who genuinely, like Roman soldiers, they're curious, they're welcoming. They enjoy hearing stories about the empire's faraway cities. Some bring gifts to the fort, bread, cheese, dried herbs. Others invite soldiers to small festivals or meals. Children wave at you whenever you pass by, and if you're lucky, they won't throw mud at you later. These friendly connections make the frontier feel less lonely. They remind you that humans everywhere want the same basic things: safety, food, community, and someone to complain about the weather with. Suspicious locals, the silent watchers. Not everyone smiles when you walk by. Some locals stare quietly. Some keep their distance. Some whisper among themselves as you pass. They're not necessarily dangerous. Many simply don't trust Rome or any large power that shows up at their doorstep. And honestly, you can't blame them. A huge fort suddenly appears near your village, and strangers in armor walk around acting like they own the place. You'd also have questions. Interactions are polite, but cold. You say, hello. They nod stiffly. You both walk away feeling like you passed a social test you didn't study for. Over time, some warm up to you, others never do. That's frontier life, local leaders' diplomacy. With a slight bit of tension, every village or region has leaders, chiefs, elders, head families, or spokespeople. When they interact with the fort's commander, the air becomes thick with seriousness. It feels like two worlds trying to shake hands without dropping their pride. Meetings involve careful words, careful expressions, careful snacks, a lot of nodding, and officers pretending they understand the local language even when they don't. These leaders keep the peace more than anyone else. If they trust the fort, the region stays stable. If they don't, the soldiers feel it. Festivals and traditions, the fun part of frontier life. One of the rare joys of the frontier is being invited to local celebrations. You might see dancing around a fire, the music played on instruments you don't recognize, food you can't pronounce but tastes, incredible people laughing and telling stories in languages you barely understand, soldiers trying to dance and failing spectacularly. These moments open a window into the culture around you. You realize how deep their traditions are, older than Rome, older than your training, older than most of the maps you've seen. And on those nights, everything feels peaceful. When cultures meet and learn, living side by side changes people in small ways. Soldiers start wearing local cloaks to stay warm. Locals start using Roman metal tools. Soldiers try local food, pretend it's too spicy, then take another bite anyway. Kids mimic your marching style. You learn their greetings. They learn yours. This blending doesn't happen overnight. It happens slowly through everyday contact. through trade, through shared moments, through simple human curiosity. At the end of the day, the locals, friendly, cautious, proud, diverse, shape your frontier life as much as the fort and its routines. Some days, they brighten your shift. Some days, they confuse you. Some days, they help you understand a land that still feels new and wild. But always, they remind you that the frontier isn't empty. It's alive. It's full of stories. And you, the Roman soldier far from home, have become a part of those stories. Most days on the Roman frontier were slow, really slow. The kind of slow where you start counting how many cracks are in the fort wall, or trying to guess which mule in camp is secretly plotting to kick someone today. But every now and then the universe decided to shake things up. And when that happened, it usually came with horns, shouts, or the unmistakable feeling that something big was about to go down. Tonight's story is about that moment, the rare times when the enemy actually came. Let's set the scene first. Picture the frontier at dusk. The sky is fading from gold to deep blue. The wind is sliding through the trees or across the snowy hills. The fort is quiet, too quiet. Soldiers are settling into the usual routine, except tonight something feels different. Even the camp dogs, who normally bark at everything, including shadows, are sitting still like they've sensed something in the air. A Roman soldier on night watch would be standing on the rampart, leaning on his spear, probably trying not to yawn too loudly. Nights were long, boring, cold. But suddenly he'd hear something he wasn't expecting, a sound that didn't fit. Maybe footsteps in the woods, maybe distant horn, maybe just something off. And the moment that happened, every soldier's heart would snap awake like someone dumped cold water on it. One of the first signs of danger on the frontier was noise. Opponents almost never moved silently. They moved in groups with their own battle songs, war horns, or the rustling of dozens of feet through the darkness. Roman soldiers were trained to listen. Not just hear, listen. The frontier taught them that good ears kept you alive. When the alarm was raised, everything inside the fort changed at lightning speed. The soldiers who were half asleep, suddenly Olympic runners. The ones who were playing dice? Dice? What dice? Never heard of them. Someone would shout, ad signa, meaning to the standards. It basically meant everybody get your gear. Right now, no excuses. Soldiers would rush into formation, pulling on armor that still smelled like yesterday's sweat. Strapping sandals, grabbing shields, making sure helmets were straight. There was no heroic music playing, just the chaotic rustle of dozens of people trying to get ready without tripping. But here's the thing. Romans were experts at this. They trained for it, repeated it, practiced it until they could do it half asleep, which honestly, they sometimes were. When danger came, the first goal was simple: stand together. The Roman shield wall wasn't just a strategy, it was basically the ancient version of strength in numbers. Shields locked together, spears lowered, helmets down, a solid line, a living iron wall. And behind that wall were men trying their best to stay calm and ignore the fact that their stomachs were doing backflips. Now, what exactly they faced depended on where the frontier was. On the northern borders, like Britannia or Germania, enemies often used surprise attacks. They didn't march in neat lines or announce anything with trumpets. They used the forests, the fog, and the dark. The Romans knew this. That's why they built massive walls, watchtowers, and forts spaced across the landscape like little warning beacons. On the eastern frontier, things were different. Opponents often showed up on horseback, fast and skilled. There was no creeping through bushes. It was more like a wave of movement on the horizon. But no matter the region, the feeling was the same adrenaline, fear and discipline all wrestling inside your chest. Even in these moments, Roman soldiers tried to stay focused. Some whispered quick prayers. Some joked, because humor was the only thing that kept their hands from shaking. Others stayed totally silent, eyes locked on the darkness ahead. And yes, there was usually that one guy who pretended he wasn't scared at all, even though everyone knew he absolutely was. The centurions were the loudest. Their job was to keep everyone steady. They walked behind the line, shouting instructions, trying to sound confident. If you ever wondered what a Roman battlefield pep talk sounded like, it wasn't fancy. More like, hold the line, shields up. No one do anything stupid. The truth is, most clashes on the frontier weren't giant battles. They were smaller, sharp encounters, patrols trying to sneak close, raiders testing the fort's defenses, or sudden rushes meant to scare the Romans. That didn't make them any less stressful. When someone charged toward your shield in the dark, the world shrank fast. There was no empire, no politics, just survival. But Roman soldiers weren't just muscle. They were trained to think in formation. If the enemy tried to break the line, the Romans tightened it. If the enemy rushed one side, they shifted. They worked together like pieces of a well-practiced machine. And here's an interesting thing. Many frontier enemies weren't trying to destroy Rome. They were testing, probing, trying to grab supplies or scare the soldiers. The Romans knew this, and sometimes their goal wasn't to destroy the enemy either. It was to show strength, push them back, and make sure the fort stood firm. Once the danger passed, whether after minutes or hours, everything slowed again. The horn would blow the signal to stop. Soldiers would lower their shields, breathing hard. Some would laugh nervously. Some would shake their heads in relief. A few would sit down, right where they stood, because their legs finally realized what they'd been doing. There was always inspection afterward. Centurions walking the lines, checking equipment, making sure no one wandered off, and giving lectures like strict teachers. Keep your shield grip tighter. Watch the left flank. Don't drop your spear. That sort of thing. And then came the part most soldiers secretly liked the storytelling. Back in the barracks or around a small fire, soldiers replayed every moment. I swear the guy who rushed me was the size of a tree. There were at least 50 of them. Did you see how fast they ran when we stood our ground? Of course, the stories got exaggerated. That was part of frontier life. You had to turn fear into something you could laugh about. And the next day, everyone went back to the usual boring chores. Fix the walls, clean the armor, complain about the food. Life moved on. Because that's what the frontier was, long stretches of quiet broken by sudden sparks of danger. Most nights passed with no alarms at all. But the few that did, they were burned into memory forever. And that's the life of a Roman soldier, constantly ready, even when nothing happens. You lived in the calm, waited in the quiet, and stood firm when the moment finally came. Most of all, you learned one simple truth. The frontier didn't reward bravery or heroics. It rewarded discipline, teamwork, and the ability to keep your head steady when the night got loud. That's what it was like when the enemy finally came. If you think Roman soldiers spent most of their time fighting, well, sorry to spoil the action movie in your head, but nope. Real frontier life was about training, endless training. Training on days when it rained, training when it snowed, training when it was so cold your breath came out looking like little clouds fleeing for their lives. The truth is, Rome didn't win its empire because its soldiers were the strongest or the bravest. Rome won because its soldiers trained like their centurions were allergic to laziness. So let's go inside the fort. Early morning, the sun isn't even fully awake yet. It's still rubbing its eyes. But the soldiers, they're already up because a centurion just blew his horn like he was trying to wake the dead. The men groan, stretch, and get up because you didn't ignore a centurion unless you enjoyed pain lectures or cleaning the latrines alone. First up, weapons practice. Imagine a yard filled with straw dummies on wooden posts. They looked like weird scarecrows that forgot their jobs. Soldiers grabbed heavy wooden swords, heavier than real ones, because Rome had a train hard, fight easy mindset. Yeah. Swinging these things felt like lifting a log every time. They practiced strikes, blocks, footwork over and over. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The sound echoed across the fort like a weird rhythm. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. Even a half, asleep soldier could fall into the routine. Next, shield drills. If you've ever held a Roman shield, you'd know they weren't light. They weren't, I'll casually pick this up with 2 fingers, light. They were more like, my arm is shaking, but I must act tough because everyone is watching. Heavy. Soldiers practiced raising them, locking them, pushing with them, even running with them. Centurions walk behind the line shouting things like, shields higher! Left foot forward. Stop blinking like you're tired. Okay, maybe not that last one, but it felt like it. Then came formation practice, the heart of Roman discipline. This was where Rome truly shined. While other warriors charged as individuals, the Romans moved like a single creature. One brain, one will, one giant block of shields and sandals. Soldiers practiced forming lines, rotating positions, tightening ranks. They drilled the famous testudo, the tortoise formation, where shields covered every direction. From the outside, it looked like a walking metal turtle. From the inside, it looked like a dark, sweaty box where you prayed nobody sneezed. Then there were marching drills. Lots of marching drills. Rome loved marching. Loved marching. Soldiers marched miles, carrying packs that weighed more than a small goat. The pack was called Marius, mules, because soldiers joked they were treated like pack animals. Inside the pack were tools, rations, blankets, cooking pots, a spare pair of sandals, stakes for camp walls, and anything else the army thought was just in case. Marching wasn't just for exercise, it prepared them for the real thing. The frontier was long, the terrain was rough, and the empire expected its soldiers to move fast when needed. Between all this, there were breaks, but not the relaxing kind. Breaks meant chores. Fix the barracks, repair walls, sharpen blades, patch up shields, clean armor. A soldier's life was basically a cycle of train, clean, fix, repeat. Now, here's the funny thing. All this training didn't just make soldiers strong. It made them bored, and boredom leads to creativity. That's why soldiers turned training into little competitions. Who could hit the dummy the hardest? Who could run the fastest with a shield? Who could march without complaining? The answer to the last one was nobody. Absolutely nobody. But training didn't only build muscles, it built trust. When you drilled side by side with the same men every day, you learned how they moved, how they reacted, how steady they were. You learned who panicked easily and who stayed calm. You learned who cracked jokes during drills and who stayed silent with the serious. I am one with my shield. Look, on the frontier. This mattered. In a real fight, you needed to know the guy next to you wouldn't drop his shield or forget to step forward. Training wasn't just practice. It was bonding Roman style. Then there were the centurions, the masters of training. These guys were like strict PE teachers mixed with drill sergeants. They carried vine sticks they used to tap soldiers who weren't focused. They shouted constantly. They corrected every mistake. But here's the thing: soldiers respected them deeply. A good centurion made his men better, faster, safer. He trained them so hard that real battles felt easier. Some centurions were fair. Others were terrifying. But all of them shared one goal: keep the legion strong. And training wasn't only physical. Soldiers learned signals, commands, map reading, fort building, scouting, and even basic engineering. The Roman frontier wasn't just guarded by fighters. It was guarded by builders, planners, and problem solvers. Think of it like this: a Roman soldier could fight you, build a bridge over your river, and then organize the supplies while telling you exactly where your village boundary was. Multitasking kings. Finally, when the day's drills were done, soldiers were exhausted, muscles aching, sandals dusty, arms shaking from holding shields too long. But there was also a quiet pride in the air, a feeling of, yeah, we did that. At night, when they sat around fires or lay in their bunks, they knew something important. Training was the reason they survived. It was the reason the fort stood. It was the reason Rome's enemies hesitated, because they all knew this simple truth: you don't wait for danger to start preparing. You prepare so well that danger thinks twice. And that's what frontier training was all about: staying ready even when nothing much happened, staying sharp in a place where boredom could make you careless, staying disciplined in a world where one mistake could echo for miles. The frontier demanded patience, but Rome demanded readiness. And between those two forces, a soldier learned to be something special, calm, capable, and ready for whatever came over the horizon. For all the marching, drilling, shouting, and shield lifting hero moments, there was one part of frontier life that no training manual ever explained: the quiet ache of being far from home. A Roman soldier might stand tall in the shield wall, looking like a walking tank, but inside, he was still a person with memories of warm kitchens, noisy markets, childhood friends, and the one bakery in town that made bread so good he still dreamed about it on cold nights. Frontier life wasn't just about danger. It was about distance. Real distance, not my house is 2 streets away, distance, but my home is many days, weeks, or even months of marching behind me, distance. When a soldier joined the army, he signed up for years of service, sometimes 20. That was enough time for a whole generation at home to grow older without him. So let's step into the emotional side of the frontier, the part that didn't show up in battle records, but lived quietly inside every soldier. First letters. Writing home was one of the most important moments in a soldier's routine. Some soldiers weren't great writers, so they'd ask a friend to help them. The letter usually started with something like, "I hope this finds you in good health," which was ancient Rome's version of, "Hey, just checking in." But then came the real feelings. "I miss the farm. I hope the harvest was good. Tell my brother to stop stealing my sandals." Sending the letter wasn't guaranteed. Roads got dangerous. Messengers got delayed. Weather ruined tablets and parchments. But even writing the letter helped. It made home feel real again, not just a memory. And receiving a letter, that was like getting treasure. A soldier would read it 10 times, then tuck it into his pack like a precious item. Even the bossiest centurion respected letter day. Next, friendships. The army didn't just create soldiers, it created families. Not the kind you were born into, but the kind you built through cold nights, shared jokes, and long marches where everyone complained about the same things. Friendship on the frontier wasn't simple, it was deep. When you trained with someone every morning, ate with them every evening, and stood shoulder to shoulder in danger, that bond grew strong fast. These weren't casual school friends. These were trust you with my life friends. You had the joker, the guy who made jokes during training just to keep everyone from falling asleep. You had the quiet one, the guy who said 5 words a week, but could fix a shield faster than anyone. You had the storyteller, the one who could turn a simple rabbit sighting into a legendary tale. And you had the worrier, the soldier who always imagined the worst, but somehow survived everything. Together, they formed something powerful, a brotherhood that made the frontier bearable. But one thing bonded soldiers more than anything else: shared boredom. Nothing unites people like sitting on a wall for hours, watching nothing happen and trying to guess how long before the centurion yells again. Soldiers invented games, songs, and inside jokes to stay sane. Some carved little figures out of wood. Some played dice. Some competed to see who could throw a javelin the farthest without hitting something they weren't supposed to. There were also moments of calm, the kind that stayed with a soldier long after he left the frontier. Like watching the sunrise from the ramparts when the whole sky turned gold, or listening to the wind move through the trees at night, or sitting by a fire while hummed a simple tune their mother used to sing. Even the food, which everyone complained about, somehow tasted better when shared with a friend after a long day. And then there was homesickness. Even tough soldiers felt it. Some felt it quietly, others loudly. A soldier might stare at the distant hills and wonder what his family was doing at that very moment. He might think of his mother's cooking, or the river he used to swim in, or the smell of local markets in summer. Homesickness came especially hard during festivals. Soldiers remembered the lights, the songs, the bustle of their hometowns. The army tried to celebrate too, but frontier festivals were small, a few decorations, a little extra bread, maybe a cup of wine if supplies were good. Sometimes a soldier wondered, "Is home still the same?" That was the scary part, knowing that years as were passing while he stood on frozen walls or hot, dusty plains. But the army gave soldiers something important to balance that sadness: purpose. On lonely nights, a soldier reminded himself why he was there. Protecting the empire wasn't a small job. The frontier depended on him. Rome depended on him. He might miss home, but he also knew his work mattered, and that gave him strength. There was also hope. Roman soldiers could earn good pay, land grants, or citizenship for their children. Many dreamed of retiring somewhere peaceful: a little farm, a warm home, maybe a family. Those dreams kept them steady through the toughest days. The truth is, frontier service made soldiers grow. Not just in muscle, but in spirit. You learned patience. You learned resilience. You learned how to keep moving even when your heart wanted to be somewhere else. You also learned how to enjoy small things: a warm cloak, a good night's rest, a joke from a friend, a sunrise after a long watch. Life became simple but meaningful. So what was the emotional life of a frontier soldier? It was a mixture: pride and loneliness, strength and longing, fear and courage, hardship and laughter. A Roman soldier's heart wasn't made of stone. It was made of memories, friendships, and the quiet hope that someday he would go home to a life he earned through years of cold nights and dusty days. And that's what held him together: not armor, not drills, not orders, but the human connections he built along the edge of the empire. Because in the end, the frontier didn't just shape soldiers' bodies, it shaped their souls.